Well, enter Tosin Kejawa, only 22, but already 10 fights into a professional career. And he's a talented young guy with plenty of skills, though he did ended up getting dragged into a bit of a war last time up. He was put down in the second round back in November, and having looked like he was going to outpoint, outskill, out-talent his Tanzanian opponent, ultimately it was a bit of a gut check, probably an early one that him and his team weren't expecting. You can see he's got the advantages in height and reach, and they are substantial. Several inches in height and some 8 inches in reach as well. So Cislak will be looking to get under those long arms and to use a bit of his strength and his experience to unsettle Kejawa, which was exactly what happened last time out. It's a real contrast in styles, Andy, we've got coming up.
It is. I'm looking forward to seeing Kejawa because physically he looks impressive. He's got a good record, and again, like a Ashoba, he's been taken on by Tony Borg and that team in Newport, so he must have something about him. So very much looking forward to seeing what he's got. Cislak is a tough guy, but he does give you a chance because he does like to try and win. He's got some good away wins, actually.
Yeah, absolutely. If he gets a chance, he will. He did it in France back in May. What can he provide tonight? We're going to find out.
Ladies and gentlemen, this bout scheduled for 6 3-minute rounds in the light heavyweight division. This bout is brought to you by Johnny Clark of Top Tier Boxing and their proud sponsors, by Insulations, Synergy Direct, and Think Green Partners. This bout is sanctioned by the British Boxing Board of Control. Your timekeeper at the bell, Brett Bowles, and the third man in charge of the action in the ring, A-star referee, Kieran McCann. And now, ladies and gentlemen, introducing to you first, fighting out of the red corner. He's wearing the red and white. His official weight of 12 stones, 2 pounds. He has a record of 26 fights, 1 draw, 8 wins, and 3 of those wins come in by way of knockout. Hailing from Poland, Adam Cislak. And his opponent across the ring, fighting out of the blue corner. He's wearing the black and red. His official weight of 12 stones, 8 pounds. He is currently undefeated with 10 wins, and 5 of those wins come in by way of knockout. Hailing from Bristol, England, United Kingdom, Tosin Kejawa!
Lads, listen up. You both know the rules. You will obey my commands at all times, all right? When I tell you to break, you break clean, take a step back and throw no punches. Watch your heads in close. Most importantly, lads, protect yourself at all times, all right? Shake hands.
Well, I think Lagos, Nigeria might be laying claim to Tosin Kejawa, but Bristol is no doubt his home for now, and that is where he is laying his head and hopefully making his hay as he embarks on a boxing career that has seen him move to 10-0 so far. And early on, he will look to work behind that long jab and keep things at range, but that's exactly the opposite of what Adam Cislak wants.
Exactly. He's going to need to find a way inside that lead hand, Cislak. He had a nice little dip and roll there. But he's showing us in the early stages, Kejawa, that it looks like he does have a solid enough jab. But Cislak, as you can see right from the beginning, we talked about it on the tail of the tape, he does try and get something done. He does look to try and win. And when you're up against him, that makes him a good opponent, a good test, because he brings some ambition, but that also gives you an opportunity. It's not the case here that you're up against someone who's just looking to cover up for 6 rounds. He gives you more than that.
Indeed, and because of that, when you've got a young prospect, the matchmakers have got to give it good thought about whether this is the right test at this stage of the career, because if there are any openings, any weaknesses, then Cislak will will try and unearth them and try and capitalise on them.
And he's obviously game. I mean, I know you have to be in the away corner, but he's giving away some size here because he's a middleweight, really, Cislak, isn't he, I think? Super middleweight at an absolute stretch. He's definitely not a light heavyweight, and Kejawa definitely is.
Yeah, the 6 pounds up was 6 pounds between them at the weigh-in yesterday. He did weigh in at light heavy last time up, Cislak, but as Andy said, prior to that, he's sub 170 pounds regularly. In fact, he was in between super light and welterweight once upon a time. So yeah, there is certainly a discrepancy naturally in body weight and size, different stages of their career, but ultimately it can come down to attitude, mentality, and indeed a punch or punches. And ultimately last time, what looked like it could have been a bit of a cruise and a dominant night for Kejawa. All it took was a right hand and a left hook, and suddenly all the plans went out the window, as Mike Tyson famously once said. And you know, it just became a bit of a fight, and ultimately he had to show something else in that fight, but probably not the kind of thing that Tony Borg and his team were hoping they were going to see at this stage of his career.
It's a strange one, that, for a trainer, isn't it? Because in a way you're pleased because he's been put down early and he's managed to recover, but in a way you're not because that wasn't supposed to happen. So there's positives to take from it, but you'll know that in the back of your mind you're kind of wondering whether that should really have happened against the kind of opponent he was in with. But you can't be perfect every time, can you? And if you can dig in and turn things around, then that's always a good sign.
Absolutely right. There was a lovely chopping right hand from Kejawa that we saw just before the end of the round, and I think that got the attention of Cislak. And we spoke about it, I think, before, Andy, about we're always, certainly as fans, as pundits and as commentators, we're always hyping up negatively when a fighter gets clocked, and it's the business they're in. You know, we always view it negatively. Oh, he shouldn't be taking shots like that, but it's the business, and it's how you react to it. Obviously, there is the mantra, hit and don't get hit, but
Corners,
the likelihood is that they're going to get their feet wet.
100%, and some nights a fighter, to an extent, chooses to take a few because they realise that the best way to win, A to B, they don't really have the power to bother you. You're okay to walk through a few to finish them off, and then you'll get criticised for taking too many punches, particularly if you turn professional with a big reputation. Buatsi used to get that a bit earlier in his career, that he was taking a few too many on the chin, but the reason he decided to do it in 2 or 3 fights was because he wasn't bothered by the power, and he knew the quickest way to get the job done was just to take one to land 5 or 6, and it's not realistic to think that somebody's going to go through their entire career punch perfect. And you need to know at some point, don't you? You need to know.
And one of the things, and it just reminded me, that short right hand that Kejawa landed at the end of that first round, and he again, there was another clipping shot early in this second round, but Andy's got a new book out now called The Knockout, and the one thing that going through that really struck me, certainly as a commentator, as a fan, to be a little more thoughtful and wary of and mindful of, is the fact that one of those punches might just have unsettled the fighter, and I mean physically, upstairs in the brain, might have unsettled them. And you know, they could be, it might not have been an obvious shot, it might not have been a knockout shot, it might not be one that the commentators were going whoa at and the fans were up on their feet at, but you never know in those little exchanges. Sometimes there's a punch that has an effect, and it's an effect that lingers for the fighter who took it, and that's something they have to deal with for maybe a round, for 2 rounds, 3 rounds. And that was one of the really interesting facets of the book. Doesn't have to be a knockout. Sometimes there can be a punch at a given time in a fight that actually has a lasting effect during that fight, if not beyond.
That's so true, and they can be difficult to see because fighters are so good at disguising it. They're so good at hiding pain. They're so good at making out like nothing has happened, and often it will happen and we won't notice it. And we sat here and done this a lot, and doctors will admit that sometimes it takes them a long time to really see it. But if it has happened, you've been clipped by one and a little bit buzzed, as they would describe it, then your reactions are a that bit slower. You buy feints more because you respond to what your opponent's doing more. You become a little bit more kind of gullible reflex-wise, if that makes sense, and it just has a big effect in loads of different ways and can make you more susceptible to really catching one.
And I think that Kejawa has just subtly, if not hurt, then made a little impression a couple of times on Cislak. Things have just slowed down, and he's got a little bit of control, which I didn't necessarily expect so early on. Shouldn't be a surprise with the skill set he's got, but I think just a couple of those shots might have got through from the bigger man.
And some people have just got what we describe as heavy hands, haven't they? He doesn't load up that much or throw anything with seemingly massive power here, Kejawa, but it's not really about that. If you can catch somebody with something that they're not completely ready for, or if you can fool them almost by the look of you into thinking that maybe you don't punch that hard, and then all of a sudden you hit them with something that they're not expecting, it's that change of pace more than anything else. It just means that the brace mechanisms aren't quite what they should be, and you end up, as you described in the previous round, you end up getting a little bit hurt by something because you weren't really expecting it. You know, to beat somebody for pace, if you're playing a game of cricket and you're up against a bowler and they beat you for pace, it doesn't need to be express pace, it just needs to be quicker than you thought it would be. And that's often what does the damage. So when we talk about fighters varying up the weight of shot, kind of tapping, and then they'll really sink one in, that's what that's about.
And again, the left hook right at the start of the round just had a bit of an effect, a little bit of a reaction from Cislak, who has only been stopped the 4 times in those 17 defeats, and none too often as well. Brad Ray did do it back in 2023, which gives you an idea of weight as well. Again, if we're talking about a guy called Brad Ray, who can punch, but obviously at lower weights than where Cislak is operating tonight. He's just getting through a couple of times, Kejawa.
Into round 3, and he's become slightly more expansive as well.
Unlike Ashoba, who we saw earlier, she was into football and table tennis when she was younger and almost kind of fell into boxing because it was kind of happening around her with some people she knew and she thought she'd give it a go. This fella has always wanted to be involved in fighting of some capacity or another. Loved martial arts as a kid, big fan of Bruce Lee and Jackie Chan, and then moved on to boxing. He's always been sporty and combat orientated.
It's always had a strong foothold in Nigeria, boxing. Football's the biggest sport there, as it is in so many countries around the world. But you look at the British Nigerians who've done really well the last few years, obviously led by Joshua, but Richard Riakpo, Lawrence Okoli, Dan Aziz, Danny Egbenike, who we saw in some small hall classics, didn't we? You know, they're all doing, you know, there's a big representation there.
Yeah, and I think Larry Ekindeo was part of his team in the last couple of fights, or at least has been a ringside presence. Larry, who was a kind of welterweight, 116, lost only one fight, maybe 7, 8, 9 and 10 years ago. And I've just been looking back. The other week there was the anniversary of Ike Ibeabuchi against David Tua, which is probably, if you've never seen that, but if you're an anorak like Andy and I, you'll be aware of it. But that is one of the unsung heroes of the heavyweight division. I think from around 97 or thereabouts, or the early 90s. You ever get a rainy day fight? Oh, that's a lovely uppercut, whipped in there. Some of those shots getting through. He's covering as though there was a body shot that went through as well, Cislak, but it was the uppercut that was the eye-catching shot, and it was almost thrown like a heavyweight. And as I was just saying, that two Ibuchi fight, one from the 90s, hidden gem of heavyweight classics, Andy, and there was a couple of big light heavyweight shots getting through at the end of that round.
There really were, and in the second half of that round, again, he just upped the pace a bit. That left hand to the body made him take a couple of yards too, and prior to this, and I think we're about to see it now, and there it was. It didn't even land completely clean, but you could see that he felt it. He is feeling these punches of visitor Cislak. He is feeling them. He's midway through this contest, and I think that Kejawa, if he puts his foot on the gas and really puts those punches together, I think he can get the stoppage here, because this is uncomfortable.
Seconds out.
And the guy in the blue just behind him, just gone out of the ring there. I think that's Daniel Przewslik, who's in action later on against Alex Cole. So that's coming up in a few fights' time. He's a part of the Polish network behind Cislak, who's finding things a bit tougher as we go by round, and some of those meaty shots, as I said, it started with a short chopping right hand at the end of the first, and although they have been select and choice, those heavy shots have got through from time to time as the rounds have gone on.
Cislak, though, as he does there, always looking to try and punch. Looks to try and move in behind that jab. Good head movement there. He's a proper fighter, Cislak.
Yeah, he's kind of laudable, and you have so much respect for it. It does, as you said, right before the very start, it does, in its own way, put him right in the fiery furnace and creates opportunities and platforms for his opponents.
I'd really like to see Kejawa in this round, in the second half of it, or maybe from about now, just try and turn up the heat, because he'll know that when he lands, he'll be able to feel it through those gloves. He'll feel those knuckles land, and he'll feel his opponent give a bit. He knows that he's got the ability here, the capability of doing him some damage, and I want to see him go after it.
Halfway through the fourth round of this one, scheduled 4-6. The left hook just landed there from Kejawa, maybe slightly on the inside of the glove, which would just nullify some of the power. Well, that was a wicked little shot, wasn't it? Again, he didn't have all the purchase on it, but a terrific little right uppercut, and then a left uppercut goes on, and he's getting his wish. He's starting to go through the repertoire, and maybe just waiting round by round for some of the steam to go out of the work of Cislak, and then he can build through the final minutes.
He's nice and patient, isn't he? That mouth hanging open of Cislak a little bit, and he is picking it up here towards the end of the round, and again he'll be seeing even more clearly than we are that some of these punches are registering, but he's still got two more to go after this. 6 minutes is a really long time, and it could be that he's pacing this just right.
The uppercut's working really well for him. He's picking those shots beautifully. He's not throwing everything into it. It's not maximum torque on those shots, but landing them with precision. Well, the storm's been brewing. Cislak so far weathering it. I suspect Tony Borg and the team will be pretty happy in that corner. I think I can see Sean Murray over on the far side as the sponsor who brought Kejawa and Ashoba across from Nigeria to ply their trade here. And looking at it, if you were looking at it purely as a business project and an investment, they'll have been looking through their fingers last time up when he went down in the second round, that's for sure.
It must be a nerve-wracking business when you've invested somebody like that, but you know there are going to be bumps in the road, but they can both really fight, can't they? You can see that they can both fight. The difficulty is building a profile around a fighter who doesn't have that UK background. Basically, being able to sell tickets is important, and that will be very, very difficult for them, so they'll have to catch the eye whenever they do get an opportunity. So it's great for them to be on the card like this, because they definitely have ability, but that by itself in the business of boxing, it's not enough, is it?
No. Sometimes you get sort of fighters who've come from abroad, based themselves here, can really kind of catch on, almost cult status. Remember Choi Svinpurev, who developed a bit of a kind of cult following in his time, I suppose in his own way. Thomas Asomba has in a small way up in the north, and this fella no doubt will have a few friends over the Bristol way. Well, that uppercut has worked beautifully for him. I'd like to see him really work behind the jab, make it heavier, more constant throughout.
If you've got the ability, but you don't necessarily have the obvious commercial marketability of selling a lot of tickets, then it can still be done. It absolutely can still be done. You need to get a title, because then that becomes your currency. Whatever title it is, then people will have to fight you, because prior to that, they can avoid you, can't they? That's the problem. You become high risk and low reward. And if that's the case, then you have to be patient, and you have to make sure that when your opportunity comes, you take it.
Well, there's no doubt Cislak's, if not on red alert, has been on kind of amber warning for much of this fight, hasn't he? Heavy shots landing every now and then as we head inside the final minute of this 5th round.
To an extent, you wonder if Kejawa, unless he looks to finish really strong here, is almost taking this round off slightly, just to leave himself with plenty in the tank for the final round. He's done 10 rounds, so there's no way that he'd be nervous about doing 6, but Cislak's had a better round this round, hasn't he? There hasn't really been that flashpoint just yet, or that kind of half flashpoint we've seen before, or maybe we're about to see one now.
Yeah, there was a gorgeous left hook come uppercut, which he whipped in to the body there, that definitely had an impact. That definitely hurt. He tried it there again towards the end as well. So every now, the only little cameos, unfortunately, of real quality and heavy hitting technique and power from Kejawa. Just the lingering feeling, Andy, that maybe he could build the tempo and inject a bit of pace and energy to it, as we've gone through the last couple of rounds.
Possibly. You definitely feel that he could, don't you, when you look at him up there in the ring. You never know what the instructions are from the corner. They might be keen on the idea of banking some rounds tonight. At light heavy, you don't ever want to mess around, because the higher you go up in weight, really anything can happen, and the longer you stay in there, then potentially there's always the chance that something could go wrong. But it might be that they wanted him to get a few under his belt here, and they'll let him off the leash for this last one. Because he's not boxed for a while, has he? It was the end of last November, wasn't it?
Yeah, that's right. Been out for 7 months. So first outing of the new year. I always think when you look at when they get to the sort of penultimate round, stroke final round, the opponent, in this case Cislak, could see the finishing line, so the mentality to survive no matter what is strong, and maybe just the urge not to take risks from the prospect, in this case Kejawa. Not to, the corner will be suggesting to him, don't do anything daft, so the likelihood of going the distance just increases, particularly when you get to that kind of penultimate round.
It definitely does, and as you say, the fact that you can see that finishing tape is a big thing, isn't it, if you're operating out of the away corner, because we've seen it so many times. Somebody seems like they're in trouble and they get that second wind, and that second wind comes from the fact that the end is in sight, basically. But for Kejawa, whether he does or doesn't stop Cislak tonight is not going to have any massive bearing on his future prospects, I think it's not a bad thing necessarily for people to be able to see what he can do over the course of a few rounds, because it's been a good watch.
Yeah, he's got the skills, no doubt about it, and not been troubled at any stage. He's been allowed to work on a few things. Yeah, those uppercuts in up close have really worked a treat. He's managed to catch Cislak square quite a few times, and both left and right hands have worked beautifully for him. And he's just flowing now through the final couple of minutes. Looks like he's enjoying himself.
It does, just up on his toes a little bit. A minute to go. Cislak, as we've been saying, never stops trying to come forward, and there's some signs to it as well. He's always looking to try and move his head. Got a nice right hand off there.
Well, there's just a reminder, when you are kind of flowing on the back foot, it's so easy just to kind of paw and flick with the jab, and if you do that, you do create little bits of opportunity for your opponents, and Cislak kind of latched onto that. Final 30 seconds. Not putting anything behind any of these shots in the final rounds, Kejawa. I think he's either under instructions of very much risk averse, job mainly been done. And he danced and skilled his way through the final 3 minutes to get I think an all-the-way decision.
I don't mean this in any way disrespectfully, but he kind of treated that like a spar, didn't he, really, Kejawa? Cislak was a good sparring partner for him because he was always looking to try and make him work, but there were a couple more gears in there, at least, for Kejawa, at least. If he'd really wanted to put his foot to the floor there, which I would have liked to have seen him do, then I think we could have seen something really quite explosive.
It was supposed to be Patrick Mendy in the other corner. That fight fell through, so it was Cislak who stepped forward. So he's sparred with the likes of Dan Aziz, Zach Chelly as well, so he's getting the grounding. Easy to forget he's only 22, so very early days for Tosin Kejawa. Let's get confirmation of it now with us.
Ladies and gentlemen, after 6 rounds of boxing, we go to the referee scorecard. Referee Kieran McCann scores the bout 60-54. And your winner, Tosin Kejawa.
So, all the way, every round, and we got a good glimpse into the world, the boxing world of Tosin Kejawa, who moves to 11-0, and with, you know, the likes of Buatsi, who beat Dan Aziz for the Commonwealth title, setting their sights elsewhere. He's got Willie Hutchinson, of course, in September on the AJ against Dubois bill as well. Just the possibility that Commonwealth title becomes vacant, and maybe they'll start pressing him towards something like that.
Yeah, that's a good shout. You'd imagine that definitely will become vacant. I'd be amazed if it didn't. So that is something they could maybe look at. As you say, still only 22, which is young. It's really, really young, and I think they'll just look to get him back out again as quick as they can.
So, very early days. I mean, we've seen Zach Fee, 19-year-old, and Elizabeth Ashoba got the job done. Fellow Nigerian, and now Kejawa does likewise. Let's get some reaction, see what they have to say. They're now the team with Ali.
Tosin, you remain undefeated. How'd that one feel, which was your 11th outing as a pro?
First of all, I want to say thank you very much to everyone for coming out to support, you know. And I want to say a big thanks to the promoter for putting me on the show, yeah. I feel so excited, yeah. It's been 7 months out of my injury, yeah. So I feel so excited to be back to get a big win.
Now this was your first fight of 2024. Now you've had that one. What is the plan for the rest of the year?
Just to keep stepping up, you know, because I've lost the rankings in 7 months. I haven't been fighting, so I just want to get back doing my thing and keep going up ranking.
It was a fantastic performance. Great to have you on the show. Well done.